I have a couple of questions for you. The first one that I have is the profession out there regulator in the country? Like, for example, the realtors, do they have to have a license? Are they controlled? How does that work?
Who's the question for?
If you want to answer, go ahead, and then we go with Napoleon.
Sure. It is unlicensed, as in anyone can sell real estate and everyone thinks they can and do. It's unregulated, which means it's a bit of the wild, wild west. So, you don't have people being educated about real estate in the way that we do here in America, which is, heavily principled and guided and so forth, with ethics and a specific approach so that you can protect the consumer, right? Which is why we have TREC and NAR and so forth, and protect yourself as a broker, an agent. So where we are in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and I would say much of the Caribbean, much of the third world, it's buyer beware. And so it's just really important that you work with a broker, an agent that you trust. And I know that we, being part of a worldwide brand initially and now having our own firm, we actually work with all of the TREC, NAR systems, approaches, methodology, and we apply that there. So our clients are very comfortable working with us because they know what they can expect. And having a SIPS designation, you're much more familiar with the real estate environment that your buyer is coming from, right? What their expectation is, and you can navigate that a whole lot better. So it is wild, it's unregulated, it can be very unethical, and you're hold yourself to a much higher standard, which is the standard we have here in Texas. Makes it very challenging every day because you're swimming upstream and your competition is everywhere, with unlicensed, uneducated in real estate competition. So
wow, thank you for sharing that. That's very interesting.
Yeah. It's not for the faint of heart.
What about you, Napoleon? How does that work in Dominican Republic?
Well, it's almost identical to what Michelle just said here. Of course, in a third world developing country, the people, no one basically there's no regulations whatsoever. So everybody is walking around selling real estate. And that's a nightmare here. And you've got to be very, very, very careful about who you're doing business with. And it's always a good rule of thumb to make sure that, that any person that you're doing business with has a registered tax-paying corporation here, so that that they have some regulations. But other than that, the people are not regulated. Everybody's practicing real estate, and it's all sorts of problems ongoing on a daily basis. People think they own property or just acquired a piece of property, and there's liens and things against the property, and people don't really know about it. It's just a mess, really, for lack of better words, trying to acquire real estate. So we suggest and recommend that people have an attorney to handle the transaction for them on behalf of them, as well as a realtor. But here, typically, an attorney pretty much handles the transaction from the beginning to the end. And without an attorney, you're really just kind of at the mercy of the wolves here. And you're more than likely going to have a problem in that transaction, because everything is so unethical in business practices, and everybody's looking for opportunities. So you just have to really, really be careful when you're acquiring any type of real estate here.
Well, thank you for sharing that. And just to the audience, we're going to have breakout rooms at the end. So you have other questions for the panelists. We're going to go through that point as well. So let's go to our second question that I'm having here. So how hard is it for a foreigner to purchase in your area? And what are the restrictions that you guys they have out there? Michelle?
There are no restrictions for foreigners to purchase. So it's not like in some other countries where they can purchase here in America, but we can't purchase there. Or you can't purchase farmland or anything like that. There are no restrictions. However, you do have to acquire what's called an alien landholder's license. So basically anyone can purchase except for wanted felons, people that have highly communicable lethal diseases like Ebola. So basically you have to go through, it's essentially a background check. So we know who's coming into the country, who's purchasing in the country, and can we work together? So we have denied alien landholders licenses to different people because you have to protect against fraud. And so we get basically a police report that you have to provide. You go to the county office, and you get basically a record that says that you are have a clean record. You get a medical certificate that says you're in good health and you do not have something that basically can come into the country and wreck the economy. 3 years of taxes to say that you are who you say you are, and you're basically a citizen of good standing in your country of origin. So that takes about 3 months to completely process and go through the system. In our country, just about every minister of some different part of the country will have a look at that file, and ultimately it's approved by the prime minister of the country. So that's all done with the help of a conveyance lawyer, just as in Dominican Republic. We are under English common law. And so here, the real estate, the technicalities of the real estate transaction, the legal aspects of it is done by a conveyance lawyer. You cannot purchase property without that because it's a legal contract. Here in Texas, we have a standardized contract that has been created by lawyers. And so that we don't have to involve a lawyer in everything that you do. That's why you can't make any changes essentially to the contract. But in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, it is a purchase agreement between two parties that's facilitated by a lawyer. The lawyer does the searches, the lawyer gives you clearance on your deeds, and does the physical registering of the deed and transfers the property, disperses funds. So your real estate agent person is the person that you spend the most time with for many, many, many months, usually, doing a lot of things virtually until they're interested enough to come down and actually view properties. And the real estate person is the person that basically manages overall the transaction, in that you are explaining to them all the things that they need to know about living in another country and making them comfortable enough to purchase a particular property and not another. And then it gets handed over technically to a conveyance lawyer to manage the actual title searching and so forth. There's a question there, do they offer an option period? Yes, you can negotiate for that. And that option, but basically you want to come down and you want to see the property. You want to have an inspection done. You want to do all of these things actually before you enter into agreement and put your deposit down. So there is an option period in that they can sort of hold the deal for you and you can back out. But the second that you sign that purchase agreement and your non-refundable deposit is received, there's only one way you can get out of an agreement, and that is that you don't actually get your alien landholder's license approved. Otherwise, you're on the hook for the property, and you lose your deposit if you back out. 10% is the typical deposit, and that's a lot of money for you to be sort of mucking around with. So that's why the initial process up front, talking with an agent that you trust, is seeing the right properties for you and your family or your dreams. You know, maybe you want to start a business, you want to do other things, is the really important part, not so much the actual technicalities of the transaction that the lawyer does with you.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you for that, Michelle. And we go with Napoleon, that same question. How hard is it for a foreigner to purchase in your area, and what restrictions are in there?
Well, it's somewhat difficult to purchase here for a foreigner. You have to be prepared for it to take some time. It will probably end up being somewhere twice or three times as long as what you're accustomed to in the States to get a transaction done. It's imperative also that you have an attorney to handle the transaction from the start to the finish, as well as a licensed or a realtor that has the credentials here that can help you through this entire process. Because most of the people, as I've stated, do not have any type of credentials to practice real estate. So the process is gonna be more or less 3+ months to get a transaction closed, and even more difficult for people, Canadians, and other European people. Is virtually almost impossible to get some of those transactions done. Interest rates and things of that nature here are unbelievable, anywhere from 8 to 10% if someone wanted to try to finance a deal. Whereas when I acquired property over here, there were no financing or anything at all available to foreigners. So basically for me, my transaction was all cash. I couldn't get it financed here, and I couldn't get my lenders from the US to finance it for me in a foreign country. So I was kind of stuck in the middle there. So I ended up having to finance all of my business with my own funds. So that's very, very extremely difficult to do if you're looking at, trying to acquire multiple properties. However, the Dominican Republic offers a wide variety of properties available to people that want to buy. Foreigners have the same rights, basically, that Dominican citizens have. They can buy property on the beach, just as Dominican citizens can. So all those benefits and privileges are available to a foreigner that are available to Dominican citizens.
Great, thanks for sharing that. And actually, your answer kind of leads to the next question that I have in here, which is it possible to get loans on property in those countries?
Mhm. Yes, in St. Vincent and the Grenadines and many of the other countries, because we kind of service the Eastern Caribbean, countries that are not affiliated with Sotheby's yet, i.e. they don't have a Sotheby's in that country like Guadeloupe or Martinique or that kind of thing. We also do properties there. It's easy to get a loan. We work with Canadian banks, as much of the Caribbean has Canadian banks like the Canadian Imperial Bank of Commerce, the Royal Bank of Canada, Toronto Dominion, TD, Scotiabank. So they're all sort of have that Canadian banking structure, but they're Caribbean banks. And we also have some very competitive local banks, the Bank of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, for example, Republic Bank, where just like here in Dallas, you would, or Texas, you would shop around and sort of pit them against one another and get the best rate. It is geared to prime, so you are going to be paying 10%, or but again, they can be more competitive. It is not a place to find cheap deals. You're not going to find a beachfront that's going for next to nothing. It is a place of expats from all over the world, extremely wealthy people. A lot of times when you can't find them, they're down here. You know, so they have yachts, they have helicopters, they have all, you know, they have all this stuff. And so they're not usually coming down looking for financing. They usually have their own financing. But for those people who are in the lower end of the range, so 500,000, 600,000, or you want to maybe do a restaurant or something like that, if that's your dream, there is financing. And you know, it's expensive though, because you still have to put a considerable amount of money down. And that's where it kind of gets a little tricky. It's not like financing a home here or business here. If you wanted to do a business like Napoleon and I have our businesses, to get capital financing, this is where it gets to be a little bit tricky, and it is extremely difficult, because if you wanted to go into Wells Fargo and say, oh, I want to start a business in the Caribbean, can you finance me? They'll say, no, your collateral's not here. Why would we do that? No. And then you go down to St. Vincent, or you go down to the Dominican Republic and you say, hey, I'm here, I want to do a business. Especially if it's in real estate, they'll say, no, we don't know you. You got to be here for 3 years and show us your records and finances for 3 years before we'll finance you. So you end up, just like Napoleon said, stuck in this no man's land, where neither country will finance you, and you have to have your own capital to be able to do something that's considered speculative, like real estate. So there are a lot of barriers to entry if you are thinking of becoming a broker in another country, especially a country that's not a country of your birth. So it's very challenging. You really have to have a passion to do it, and you have to have your own financing in most instances. But for a buyer coming to buy a property, it's much easier for them to get financing, because they're looking at your income in Texas. They're looking at your taxes in Texas. They're looking at your assets in Texas. They're looking at retirement income. So, you know, for those people, it's much, much easier. And we also take a lot of the hassle and the burden away and make it more seamless for them.
Thank you. Thank you for that. We do have a couple of questions in here. One of them says, are partnerships or LLCs allowed to purchase in both countries, Dominican Republic and your country?
Yes,
Okay.
yes, but it depends on what you want to do. If you want to just purchase in the name of a holding company, for example, that's not a problem. You can do that. But if you're going to generate income in the country, then you do have to incorporate in the country and purchase in the name of a registered St. Vincent and the Grenadines company. Again, your conveyance lawyer would do all of that for you as part of the purchase process.
What about in Dominican Republic?
Well, here you can get loans, as I mentioned, touched on earlier, but it is extremely difficult, especially for Europeans and people from Canada. Typically, the banks here will allow you, to get a loan, but they're going to basically only loan you about 70%, unless the property is just like right in the tourism area or close to the beach. Okay, but they are extremely, extremely difficult to get. And it's going to take an enormous amount of time in order to be able to get that. And you're going to have to, work with a lawyer as well as an agent for an extended period of time to be able to get that. The good thing also is some of the banks, a couple of the banks that are here have connections in the US, so that some of the client information is easier to get. So that makes it easier to some extent to be able to get a deal done over here. Scotiabank, for example, is here, and they're also in the US, so that client information could be shared somewhat easy for a potential buyer that wanted to buy over here. So, but still, the entire process is going to be somewhat a struggle, and it's going to be time consuming, and you would have to basically go through the same somewhat process that you are accustomed to going through in the US, of providing financial information, 2-3 years tax returns, income statements, credit report. They're looking for the credit scores of somewhere at least at a minimum of 700 in order to be able to do any kind of deal with you here. And then from that point, if you get a deal financed, the bank pretty much handles the remainder of the process of the transaction. In that particular instance, if a bank finances it for you, you really don't have to get an attorney to handle the transaction because the bank handles all of that. They do all of the paperwork. You go through your complete due diligence process, then you end up signing an agreement, which they call a tripartite, which is a 3-part agreement where the buyer, seller, and the bank signs, and then the transaction starts at that point. Unlike in the US, when you're looking to acquire a property per se, a resale property, we make an offer, then we counter, and we offer and we counter each other like that. Here, you do all of that. You make your, you negotiate with the buyer and the seller negotiate, and they reach a verbal agreement. And once the verbal agreement is reached, then they go to the contract. So things are just a little bit different here than what you would be expecting to, what you are accustomed to in the US. But again, you can get a deal done, but it's going to take some time. And as I stated earlier, unless you have your own funds, it may be a little bit more difficult to get the transaction done. And you will have to wait some time to get it to get it closed.
Well, thanks for sharing that. And our next question is, do you have title companies and insurance and any other kind of consumer protection?
Mhm. We don't have title companies. We have the conveyance lawyer that will manage everything that a title company would have done. So, you know, we're small countries, so we don't have the ability to have complex systems and so forth in place like we do here in Texas. So it's basically you have two people involved in every transaction. The real estate agent, which does the yeoman's work and the heavy lifting of making sure that that client really wants that property, understands the property, understands what he's getting into. So a lot of the frustration that you might hear from us, we hide that from the client. We try to make it seamless. They just need to know that it's going to take about 3 months. And, you know, you need to have the funds to be able to purchase the property. And then it goes over to the conveyance lawyer, who is going to draft the legal document that binds them, take the money into escrow, disperse funds, register, transfer the deeds. So, you know, between the agent and the lawyer, you take away a lot of the headache that the client would be feeling. Your job is to make them feel happy about what they're about to do. There are, you have to actually retain the lawyer. They don't do it for free. So you actually pay the lawyer a percentage of the value of the transaction, usually about 1.5 to 3%, depending on what you're asking them to do, and make a corporation for you so that you can buy it in the name of a corporation, which I think is a very good thing to do. Anywhere, that's a good thing to do rather than doing it in your own name for the sake of liabilities. Somebody asked earlier, what are the property taxes? The property taxes are negligible. It's 0.08%. So it's not even something that you really consider. The lion's share of the money that you pay is upfront. As you come into the country, it's about 16% that you would pay on top of the sales price. So you try to negotiate so that you can buffer that a little bit. You pay 16% to cover stamp duty, to cover your alien landholders license fees and your legal fees. That gets you into the country. That's how the government makes quite a bit of money. Once you get into the country and you own your property, you pay 0.08% in property taxes every year. You can make a lot of money in rentals and a lot of other things. You get a lot of concessions. So, you know, once you get over the sticker shock of purchasing a property, it's actually very, very economical to live, run a business once you're here. As far as protecting the consumer, it is an as-is country. It is unlicensed. It is unregulated. It's buyer beware. It's all about finding the right agent to take care of your clients and do things the way that you would do them. Looking out for that client's best interests, but also having that Chinese wall, if you will, between the buyer and the seller, because in this market, I'm a dual agent on almost every transaction. I'm working on behalf of the seller and on behalf of the buyer, and I'm in the middle. I have my reputation that I have to uphold. I'm going to know these two people after the deal is done, and we all have to live together. So it always has to be a win-win, and you have to be ultimately professional, making sure that you're not working more on the seller's behalf than on the buyer's behalf. You're trying to achieve a good agreement between two parties to buy and sell one property and we're all going to know each other and be at the bar, you know, a month after the transaction and be friends. So it's very challenging for us as agents, trying to be ultimately professional and really kick in all that we've learned from the National Association of Realtors and the truck rules and so forth. That's what really protects the consumer.
That's fantastic. I admire what you do, and thank you for sharing that your experiences with us.
You're welcome.
Napoleon, do you want to add something?
Yeah, sure. Here in the Dominican Republic, as of late, there are a couple of title companies here now. Stewart Title and First American Insurance Company are actually doing business here, which are companies in the US. And they are handling pretty much the larger transactions that involve the large sums of money. The remainder of the other transactions typically are just handled by attorneys. But those two companies have just recently started doing business over here, which is helping to regulate things a little bit more and give people a little bit more, you know, security in the transactions that they're making. So that is beginning to make some difference over here as people acquire property. People, you know, you have the ability to acquire in your individual name, or you can acquire the property in a corporation or an LLC. I think someone was asking that question earlier. So you have both options to do that here as well. Doing business, you know, here is getting somewhat easier than it had been in previous years. So acquiring property for foreigners, it's starting to get easier, and people are looking and taking advantage of those opportunities that are here. There are all sorts of opportunities here, from small, you know, 1-2 bedroom type properties to big ocean front palatial properties that are available. And there are opportunities that can be bought at a very discounted price if you're available and looking and able to buy them. Unlike Michelle was mentioning that that's not the case with where she is, but here there are opportunities to buy some fantastic properties. But the key is being able to get that financed or have the funds to be able to purchase it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, thanks for that. And we have another question in here. It says, how safe is it to have property there? Is it necessary to have a local property management company if you don't live there and the majority of the year?
Mm-hmm. It's very safe. I would say, especially for expats, it's very safe. We don't have a big crime problem or anything like that. I would say that you must have someone take a look at your property. And that's because it's not like here where you can just sort of lock up and lock out the elements and not take care of it. Anywhere you are in St. Vincent, you're surrounded by water because it's a country of many, many islands, meaning there's water all the way around you, water, sea salt. And so everything deteriorates. So if you think you love gardening in Texas, it's a jungle in St. Vincent because it rains every day and it's very tropical. You need a gardener. You need a maid. You have to have a housekeeper because you have to basically clean all the time. You have to clean that salt from the salt air off of your everything, you know. So the upkeep and maintenance when you have a seaside home anywhere in the world is much greater. And in our case, it's keeping up and maintaining the house inside, keeping it clean, swept, polished. You know, all of your things will tarnish at some point if you don't do that. The good news is that this lifestyle is something that is very affordable. It's about $25 a day to have a housekeeper, more like $30 a day to have a gardener, and you don't have to have them every day. So you can have a lifestyle that you probably wouldn't have had here, because when you're a housekeeper, you do more than just keep the house. You also cook, you do laundry, you do, there's a lot of things that get done. So while you're away, everything is kept up, everything is prepared for when you visit, prepared for when your guests visit. After your guests leave, everything is cleaned, and towels fresh, prepared, sheets, everything. And so it's worth it once you buy a property to have a housekeeper and gardener. You can have a property manager. You don't probably need one just for your property. You can have somebody that, does multiple properties. So you're not paying, they're just overseeing. But as an agent, I would be recommending the property manager, recommending the housekeeper, the gardener, recommending the lawyer, so that you have a much more seamless enjoyment of your property.
Thank you for sharing that. Do you have any, do you want to add on, Napoleon?
Yes, well, here is quite different. You do not want to leave your property unattended for any period of time and go back to the States. I learned that the hard way. And I came back and everything was tarnished on my property and windows were open and it was all kind of sorts of things. And I'm in my property was in a very high touristic area. People know you're away, as the old saying, the mice will play. So people, you gotta make sure that somebody is attending that property for you at all times. You want to make sure you have a property manager that is effectively managing it for you, and or someone else to just look out and make sure everything's okay. It's pretty much safe for the most part. But again, if people see an opportunity, they will take advantage of that. So you want to make sure that at all times, someone is representing your best interests. The cost of living here is very, very, very low. The average person, for example, a housekeeper here makes more like $15 a day or less, which is about half of what Michelle was saying. So overall, people are much poor here. And again, if the opportunity may present itself, people will take advantage of that. So you have to be very, very, very careful, regardless of where your property is, even if in some of the very prestigious areas here. There's still security all over the place. You don't want to leave the property unattended for any period of time.
Well, good to know. There's another question in here. I think probably you already answered this one. If you want to add on something, you're more than welcome to do that. It says, which is the best if you have financing? So I guess probably it's about financing. You have any probably recommendations?
Which is the best what?
If you have financing.
So is it better to have financing than not? Is that the question?
I'm not quite sure what's exactly. The way I see it is probably if you have any recommendations about financing, like which will be the best lender. Is that?
Sure, we do. But we can put you in touch with loan officers, people who do this all the time. But it's still good for you to shop around. Financing is great. It looks like it was referring to the comment about partnerships and LLCs. It's always good to put your company instead of putting yourself as a personal owner when you own property from a liability perspective. It will cost you a little bit more when you're working with a lawyer to be able to do this, but all of that gets done in that same 3-month process. There are different concessions and different benefits to incorporating and putting your company under that, as opposed to putting it in your own name, because people will sue your business instead of suing you personally if something should happen, especially if you decide that you want to use your property as a rental, or you want to run a boutique hotel. It just depends on what you're doing. Financing can be a very good way of you, instead of putting out so much cash, 50% down in some instances, depending on the type of property, rather than doing that, it might make more sense for you to finance. And again, you can work out a very good deal directly with the country head of CIBC or whatever bank it is. Come down, spend some time with them, see what they can do for you.
Thank you. Napoleon, do you want to add something?
Well, as far as financing, as I mentioned to you earlier, financing is somewhat difficult to get here. And if you have the ability, then it would be great, to pay cash for what you can pay cash for, because you are going to pay very high interest rates, 8-10% for whatever you buy. And the down payment is going to be somewhat sizable as well. So there's been a lot of instances where people, have bought or tried to start constructing a property and just haven't been able to finish it because of not being able to get the deal completely done, or the bank, if they would get started on the deal, the bank would end up taking it back. Also, so there's so many unfinished properties in this country that is unbelievable, and it's all different types of scenarios where people, started financing a deal or tried to have multiple entities, banks finance the deal, and then situations where people were dishonest, and one bank pulled out, and then they end up pulling out of the deal, and then the property is sitting out half finished. And we see that all over the country here. So anytime that you can finance the deal yourself is better here, because otherwise getting it financed, you're going to end up at the end of the day, you're going to pay dearly.
But they're very good foreclosures, I bet.
Yes, there are very good deals. There are very good deals.
That's where the deals are.
And a lot of them available right now, kind of like what we experienced back in the US, like in the 2008, 2009 timeframe. There's opportunities. More importantly, if you have the cash, then you can really take advantage of opportunities here right now. And it's a good market overall for investing here. As an investor, there's great opportunities. Even, as a result of the pandemic, there are a lot of situations where people end up losing properties, and people going back to their countries and just leaving them, and all sorts of situations, which has made the country now have all sorts of opportunities for potential investors that want
Yep.
to invest here.
Yeah. I've never had a client leave a property be unhappy. I have incredibly happy clients who are living their dreams, living their life. It really, you have to have an agent that knows them, understands what they're looking for, what they need, and they're well prepared. It's going to take you longer to purchase. You're going to have more money up front if you're going to finance, or you're going to have the cash. If you're going to build, you're going to need to have somebody on that property every day, making sure those workers are doing what they're supposed to do for 8 hours a day. Okay. Otherwise, it's going to take you 3 times as long to build. You'll run out of money. You know, you'll get taken advantage of. It really comes down to having the best agent you can find in whatever country you're going into that has your interests at heart, helps you get established, helps you stay on track and on time so that that doesn't happen. And that you're not in over your head.
Mhm.
It's not a place for cheap deals anywhere. I'd say in the Caribbean, there's really no such thing. You have to have the money, you have to have the will. It's all worth it in the end, but you do have to come with some cash.
Well, and it's nice to have you here because now we have the information and we know that if we have a client, we know who can we refer it to. So thank you so much for sharing. It's a lot of great information in here, and it looks like it's time to do our breakouts. So
there were a couple of questions. They come up so quickly on the screen and go away, but just very, very quickly on insurance and hurricanes. We're actually out of the hurricane alley. So most people, again, because they're very wealthy clients, and even the not so wealthy, basically it's the quality of your construction. You need to build sustainable housing, buy a sustainable house, a well-built house, because we get tropical storms all the time. Our well-built houses don't get blown down. And so most people actually forego insurance. There is insurance, but they forego it because you end up just paying for something that, you know, you might as well just replace the windows if the windows get blown out.
We can address those. We can address those questions in the breakout rooms where they can be focused on your closer environment. So what we're going to do now is we'll open up breakout rooms. You can pick everybody can pick the breakout room they want to choose. You can switch from one breakout room to another. I will stay on the main screen if you're having problems. I will be able to assign you to a room. So I'm going to open all the rooms. I'll assign Napoleon and Michelle to their rooms, and then everybody can pick their own.
Well, thank you for joining us.